All right. So CCNF is with republicen.org, a conservative group that's a proponent of the revenue-neutral carbon tax. Bob Inglis is a leader of this group and kind of a co-founder, correct?
Bob Inglis is our founder and visionary.
Yeah, and we did an interview with him, great virtual panel session with him. Understand y'all are a proponent for the revenue-neutral carbon tax, which just talked with Josiah Neely of the R Street Institute.
R Street's awesome. Everyone should go to rstreet.org and check out all their awesome stuff.
Y'all are willing to talk about climate change. Not every other conservative is, though, and every other conservative group. Some Republican groups are kind of skittish about answering the question of what can or should be done about climate change. And so what are your thoughts on that, and what's this initiative, Republican In?
Republicen.org is where we're building the constituency for conservative climate leadership. And we need it desperately. Conservatives are the indispensable partner for action on climate and energy. The first thing I wrote to Bob Inglis when I met him like 3 years ago was, America's the country that matters most, and nothing's going to get done in the world without America. Nothing's going to get done in America without the Republicans, and nothing's going to get done with Republicans if conservatives don't stand up and say we have better solutions than the environmental left. And so what we're proponents of a revenue-neutral carbon tax, sure. What we're really proponents of is an eco-right. Is conservatives stepping up and saying more liberty and cleaner air go hand in hand, and that we can deliver better solutions for the American people than the environmental left, which the environment and climate is way too important to leave to the environmental left. And there's a lot of environmental left groups here.
And your thoughts on the President's Climate Action Plan?
The Clean Power Plan.
It is being regulated right now under the Clean Air Act, which wasn't designed for CO2, but because Congress wrote such a broad definition of it, now we have the President's Climate Action Plan.
That's right. The President's Climate Action Plan, or it's called the Clean Power Plan, it's a massive central planning regulatory scheme where the administration is how about this? The Clean Power Plan covers 30% of the American economy, whereas a revenue-neutral carbon tax would cover almost 100% of the economy. Clean Power Plan ships jobs and emissions overseas, whereas environmental tax reform keeps jobs here and reduces emissions way more than the Clean Power Plan. So if you care about climate change, we don't have a climate policy in America. Where are the environmentalists out here saying, holy crap, we don't have a climate policy? There's everyone saying that President Obama has one. He doesn't. This isn't a climate change policy.
It is serious reductions. I mean, the coal's fighting it. In a way, isn't that a carbon price?
Of course it is. It's the most clumsy carbon price possible. And because the EPA has zero jurisdiction over China and India, what does that mean? I mean, I don't know if he thinks they have jurisdiction over China and India.
But you can say that with the revenue-neutral carbon tax too.
You cannot, because border adjustments make it very easy to bring the rest of the world in with us.
Yeah. So what you're proposing kind of assumes Americans' leadership on the global level, and that other people are matching with this global carbon price?
I think what I'm saying is that if you stick with President Obama's plan, that we ship emissions overseas. And if we do a plan with a border adjustment, environmental tax reform, so people can keep more of their income, and we stop taxing labor.
Alex, what's border adjustment?
A border adjustment means that you remove the carbon tax when you export goods, and you impose it when you import goods. So if there's a country that doesn't have an equivalent carbon price, the widgets that they sell to America would be taxed at an equivalent carbon price. So our manufacturers would not be put at global disadvantage compared to folks that work in pollution havens where there's no regulation. You can't do that with the EPA. What the EPA plan does is this. It's really simple. It raises the compliance costs for businesses in America. Okay? Now all of that money just evaporates into thin air. Because when you raise compliance costs for all the American businesses, where's that money going? It's not going to the government. It's not going to build schools. It's not going to invest in research and development. It's just deadweight loss GDP.
But how is it? Most positions, for conservatives and particularly the Republican Party. I mean, you listen to the presidential candidates, they're not talking about solutions to climate change. They're going back to the
Republicans
science.
Candidates for president are in a tough spot right now in the primary. Yeah, I'd agree that everyone's people aren't saying crazy hoaxer stuff on the trail, and we should take that as a positive sign. Also, I'm not a scientist, this line that you've been hearing, I'm not a scientist, that is a step forward from the hoaxer line that a lot of people were stuck with back in the Great Recession. I mean, the problem for conservatives, I think, is that we're reaching a very awkward moment. Because I'm not a scientist is a really awkward position to have, because you're not a bioethicist or an economist either, but you have a lot of opinions.
President Obama mentioned that in his speech.
Well, thanks for throwing me under the bus by saying President Obama had the same idea.
Hey, I'm not on your team. You're on your own.
Whose team are you on?
CCNF. Facilitating
I thought you were on like Team Earth, like the rest of us.
Scientifically grounded national dialogue.
Okay, well, he's on CCNF team. I'm on Team Planet Earth. And for Team Planet Earth, we need climate policy that actually works.
Yeah.
Where were we before that?
How's the efforts coming with Republican in?
I feel like we were on the cusp of a point, and then I missed it for the sidebar.
I know you were talking about. I know you are pushing conservative campuses, conservative groups, Republican groups. How's that coming?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's coming great, but the thing I was trying to say is the awkward point for conservatives. Because when you say I'm not a scientist, it's awkward. But what happens now is that a lot of conservatives are out there saying climate change is real. We should be doing something about it. But the president's approach is wrong. The big government central planning approach is wrong. We need to access free market instruments. So when a candidate goes up there and says climate change is real, we should do something about it, the president is wrong, you kind of got to come up with a solution. Right? Otherwise, people are going to be like, well, so why should we vote for you? So I feel like we're on the cusp of real solutions in the conservative movement, of like real conservative leaders standing up and saying, like, we have better answers than the environmental left. The climate is too important to leave to the environmental left. Republic N is going well. We're brand new.
I know, yeah.
We kind of started Bob started the Energy and Enterprise Initiative, and we traveled around the country and got Bob in front of good audiences of conservatives. But now we realize one thing we kept hearing when we go around is people were like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you exist. I didn't know that there were real and eco-right, real conservatives fighting to regain the trust of the American voters on environmental issues. Where can I get involved? And we thought, well, there needs to be a grassroots eco-right organization in America, and that's what we're going to build at republican.org. So you got to go to republican.org, put up a profile, join us. I mean, we're going to follow the community where it wants to go. If it wants to go to energy liberty fights in states where big parastatal monopolies are trying to prevent people from being able to put stuff on their roof, then we'll go and help them. If you want to, we're going to fight for education on on environmental tax reform, because it's way better than the status quo. We're going to talk about things that conservatives are already good on that are good for the environment and good for the climate, like things like exporting natural gas. Globalizing the American shale gas revolution is the single most meaningful thing we can do in the short term to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions. Democrats are against exporting this stuff. It's nuts. We should talk about exporting LNG.
Cool.
Even Keystone is pro-climate. Keystone is way more efficient than shipping via tanker or rail. And conservatives need to...
But if you do Keystone,
you want to talk Keystone?
If you have a revenue-neutral carbon tax, tar sands is one of the most carbon-intensive ways to develop oil and gas.
Maybe a better question is, will the economics allow oil to flow through the pipeline instead of should the government prevent it from being built?
Yeah. But I'm just saying, but correct me if I'm wrong, but the revenue-neutral carbon tax would probably make the tar sand development uneconomic.
Well, now we're getting into a little wonky territory about how you set the price and what the schedule for it over time is.
It has to have enough pinch, otherwise it does no good, right?
Well, in general, if you set the price below, if you have a really inelastic commodity and you have a low price, it's not going to do much. So if you raise people's gas prices with a $10 carbon tax by 10 cents, it's not going to make a difference. No. But over time, two things. One, price rises over time.
Yeah.
And what that means is that when you make investments, you're not making an investment based on the carbon price today. It's also based on the lifetime of your carbon-intensive investment.
Yeah, it has to be long range. I mean, we're talking 20 years, right?
20 years, if you started at $15 carbon tax and you're going up 4% a year, in 20 years you're in the 50s or the 40s. So, I mean, that ends up, if you're going to build a coal plant, you look at that trajectory and you look at the area under the curve and you say, too much carbon liability, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. Which is the intent. Though, I hope to get more specifics on that. How it would actually work in the forum later in Climate Change National
not
Forum.
right now? Okay.
I asked former Congressman Bob English about it, but kind of wanted to flesh it out. Yeah, how would that actually work? Because in terms of what's the right price? I mean, that's a hard question. and that's based on values as much as it is on economics.
It's all values. That's another thing that the environmental left does.
we gotta
no,
go.
No, stop
We're
it.
out of
I'm
time.
making this point, man. The environmental left says that scientists somehow tell us what we need to do about climate change. It's not true. Scientists can give us risk profiles. We need to make value judgments for how we deal with that risk. And it's 100% an ethical conversation.
Yeah.
And conservatives need to be a part of it because you know why? Because we're super moral. Like, we like having ethical conversations. And it's time to have one
You
about
like being in
climate
front of a
change.
camera. hey, that's my hat.
Republican.org.
Are
we done?
Hold on. I totally forgot what I was going to say.
Because we're super moral. Like, we like having ethical conversations. And it's time to have one
You
about
like being in
climate
front of a
change.
camera. hey, that's my hat.
Republican.org. Are we done?
Hold on. I totally forgot what I was going to say. Yeah, I guess we're done.